George Foulkes. Mr. Speaker, it is a great privilege and a real pleasure for me to be asked to move the address today, together with my honourable friend for Bethnal Green and Bow. To be honest, Mr. Speaker, I wondered why me. My good friend and fellow 79er, the honourable member for Shettleston, mischievously suggested the answer could be traced back to August 1999. That was when my daughter, Jenny, gave birth to a son and made me a very proud grandfather for the first time. I didn't say we are a grandfather. But the parents were in a quandary about what first name to give him. And eventually, well... Wait for it! Eventually, Jenny came to me to tell me their decision, and she was somewhat disconcerted that when she told me the name, I burst out laughing. My grandson was to be called Blair. Now, I can assure the House I had no influence whatsoever in the decision. Well, consciously. It is a popular first name in Scotland, honestly. But it does have interesting consequences. On the Sunday after the election, a day when ministers and aspiring ministers and their telephones are almost inseparable, the phone rang at my home in Ayr. Jenny answered. It was the Scotsman newspaper. Jenny said, "Sorry, he's not here. He's with Blair all afternoon." Could you phone back this evening? So already I was imagining the Scotsman sub-editor drafting the headline, "Foulkes for Foreign Secretary." Unfortunately, the cheers for that came from the other side. Anyway, the Scotsman phoned back that evening, and they said with some awe, "We hear you've been with Blair all afternoon." I said, "Yes, I took him for a walk." So the penny dropped. Thankfully, the phone did ring again the next day. This time it was the Prime Minister, and I was back not as Foreign Secretary, but as number 2 to my right honourable friend, the member for Ladywood, at International Development, where I belong. And that brings me to what must be the real reason I'm now on my feet. It goes back over 23 years to the 22nd of May, 1979, when I made my maiden speech in the Queen's Speech debate. So this is a reward, or is it a punishment, for surviving that long. The Defence Secretary had rather ungallantly said to me, "I've got the old codger spot today." But it is very untypical of him, I have to say. When thinking of what to say, I got an unusually helpful suggestion from my honourable friend, the member for Cunningham South. He suggested I should check who was the last Scottish MP to propose this motion, as opposed to my honourable friends from Aberdeen South and Edinburgh Pentlands, who both seconded the motion so eloquently recently. I was delighted to find out that it was George Younger in 1990 who was the last Scottish member to propose it. For 13 years, George was my neighbouring MP, and notwithstanding our political differences, we cooperated very closely on local issues. Other Scots MPs described us as the Ayrshire Mafia. Probably rightly. He was known locally as Gentleman George. Why do I never get called that? Anyway, he deserved it. Once I met a delegation of protesting councillors coming out of a meeting with him at St Andrew's House when he was Secretary of State for Scotland. They said it had been a really excellent meeting. But when I asked them if he'd agreed to their demands, they said, "Oh no, but he was very nice." So sometimes being a gentleman can be politically useful as well. George mentioned in that speech in 1990 that the most important constituency issue he faced was the future of Prestwick Airport. It had then declined to almost no passenger traffic. He and I soon afterwards persuaded the BAA to sell it, and George became chair of the company that bought it, and the airport never... I don't know why they didn't think of me. The airport never looked back. My honourable friend, the current member for Ayr, has assiduously followed in his footsteps, and now it's the fastest growing airport in Britain. 2 new air links were announced from the airport in the last 2 weeks. Sadly, George Younger is currently unwell, and I'm sure all sides of the House would wish George to know our thoughts are with him today. In my maiden speech, as tradition suggests, I spoke about my constituency. I just want to add a few remarks today because this is an honour for the constituency as well as for me. My constituency is the cradle of the Labour Party. Keir Hardie, the founder of our party, made it his home from 1880 until his death in 1915. And he returned there even when he represented West Ham and Merthyr here in the Commons. Keir Hardie's first manifesto included 3 key aims: home rule, a minimum wage, and temperance. Now it's taken this Labour... Wait for it! It's taken this Labour government to achieve 2 of these 3, and may I say, the right 2. And my constituency has, since the time when Keir Hardie was Secretary of the Ayrshire Miners, had a proud coal mining tradition. Yet it's also one of the most beautiful in the country. It contains the birthplace and many of the places mentioned in the magnificent works of Scotland's bard, Robert Burns. So it is a great honour for me to have represented it for the past 23 years, although the effects of all those Burns suppers have taken their toll. I searched the poems and songs of Robert Burns to find a suitable verse for this occasion. Fortunately, no song seemed appropriate. I was going to suggest the best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after gley, and leave us not but grief and pain for promised joy, could be an ode to the leader of the opposition. But I'm not a cruel person, so I won't say it. So I chose instead, "Oh, wad some power the gift they gie us, to see yourselves as others see us." You see, Robert Burns was ahead of his time. He thought of focus groups even before New Labour. Now, in that Queen's Speech debate in 1979, the leader of the opposition, Jim Callaghan, and I, like probably almost, if not everyone here, have always had a great respect and a deep affection for Jim Callaghan. He sought a guarantee from the new Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, can't say the same about her, that overseas aid would be exempt from her planned cuts in expenditure. She refused to give such an undertaking. Sadly, she was true to her word, and spending on aid halved in 18 years. In contrast, by the end of this Parliament, spending on development will have more than doubled since 1990. And it's moving steadily towards the UN target. And there's much more. For the new International Development Department and our whole government are leading the world in securing both debt relief and trade preferences for the poorest countries of the world. And the reaffirmation in the Queen's Speech is particularly welcome. The Prime Minister, and of course the Chancellor, and particularly the International Development Secretary, deserve our huge praise for this. And although this prophet is not without honour in her own country, I know from my 4 years as her deputy that Clare is also held in even higher regard by world leaders, including the President of the World Bank, James Wolfensohn, and Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the UN. We should be really proud of her. Yeah. My only sadness is that this is one of the many achievements of our Labour government that is too often taken for granted. It reminds me of Monty Python's Life of Brian. Was it Eric Idle, the leader of the Judean People's Front, who asked... People's Front of Judea? Was it? No, it was a breakaway from the People's Front of Judea. He asked, what have the Romans ever done for us? And the reply, I think it was from John Clee, said, well, there's roads, cities, a legal system, running water, drainage, wine, and of course, peace in the streets. The ungrateful native responds, yes, but apart from roads, cities, a legal system, running water, drainage, wine, and peace on the streets, I'm sure the Prime Minister knows how the Romans felt. As well as doubling development spending, we've got a minimum wage, the lowest unemployment for a generation, the lowest inflation and mortgage rate since the Beatles. Reform of the House of Lords, a Parliament for Scotland, an Assembly for Wales, and much more. which is far too easily discounted, too easily set aside, and too easily taken for granted. Yeah. It's also too easy and far too glib for some commentators and some of our critics to pretend that this Labour government is no different from a Tory government. It would have been very strange, wouldn't it, for a Tory Queen's speech which announced a national minimum wage, ending the hereditary principle, devolution to Scotland and Wales, statutory union recognition, to name but a few. The leader of the opposition would have had even more rebels for that. And that brings me to this year's Queen's speech, not before time, I hear you. Because notwithstanding the progress of the last 5.5 years, there is still more to be done, particularly to bring peace to our streets. And the proposals outlined this morning, focusing on crime and antisocial behaviour, will take this forward. Yeah. And can I add seriously, as a Scottish MP, that the problems are no different in Scotland. Yeah. The problem of drugs is the same in Cumnock as it is in Cannock. Vandalism, graffiti and antisocial tenants are no less of a problem in the Doon Valley than they are in the Don Valley. So where responsibility is devolved, I hope my colleagues in the Scottish Parliament will not be deflected by any nationalist tendency from applying similar solutions within the context, of course, of our own legal system. It's also particularly pleasing for me to have in the gracious speech such a positive reaffirmation of the government's intention to decide on joining the single currency, once the 5 tests have been met.
Can we win?
I can read Gordon's writing, you see. And far be it from me to anticipate the outcome, but I look forward to campaigning vigorously and enthusiastically for the euro when the day comes, as I know the vast majority of my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, as you know, you're one of the 79 intake as well. I'm one of the few who survived those 18 long years, you remember them well, in opposition, to serve in government for 5 years. I enjoyed that enormously, and I'm proud to have served what I believe to be a radical, reforming government under a great Prime Minister. Yeah. But you know, the even great... But you know, Mr. Speaker, the even greater honour is just to serve as a member of this House. As an MP, I've had the joy of celebrating the return of democracy to Chile in the plebiscite, of visiting South Africa when the evil of apartheid had been swept away and everyone was able, and indeed queuing for hours, to vote, of seeing Eastern Europe before and after the liberation from the tyranny of communist dictatorship. That's why I'm eager to see us explore ways of ensuring every one of our citizens is enabled to exercise their vote, and also why I now once again spend many hours each week here in this chamber at the epicentre of our democracy, listening as well as occasionally intervening. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why it is such a particular honour to move this address today and to be followed by such an able and delightful seconder. I commend the gracious speech to the House. Yeah!